Hello, 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 everyone. We're so excited to have you today. And welcome to our Students First Bringing Humanity to Online Learning webinar. I'm super excited to welcome three phenomenal colleagues who are here with me, Czarina, Michelle, and Matthew. And we're really excited to have you here as we discuss how we can, as a community of music educators, work together and share ways to bring that sense of community to our students who desperately need that connection. So I thought we would begin rather aptly with a mindful moment. So if you would take a moment and breathe with me. And welcome. I already feel a little more at ease to welcome you here, and I hope you do as well. So we can center ourselves a little bit further with the poem Found. Feel free to close your eyes or follow along as I read, or whatever you may prefer. Maybe it's all utterly meaningless. Maybe it's all unutterably meaningful. If you want to know which, pay attention to what it means to be truly human in a world that half the time we're in love with and half the time scares the hell out of us. The unexpected sound of your name on somebody's lips. The good dream. The strange coincidence. The moment that brings tears to your eyes. The person who brings life to your life. Even the smallest events hold the greatest clues. And let's breathe together one more time. I see our virtual teaching going through stages, from the hectic anxiety of building distance learning lessons from scratch and figuring out everything that technology has to offer, to getting a hold of that wanting to be more creative, to wanting to be more explorative in our teaching, to now perhaps a phase where we're realizing this isn't just a 1-month blip in the history of our lives, and instead perhaps a longer haul. And to be honest, that can feel kind of devastating. And to wonder the next time we can sing together again, or to ask the next time we can hold hands and dance. This isn't easy. Each day is different. But just know that what you are doing is special. What you are doing is meaningful. What you are doing is impactful. And what you are doing is making a difference in the lives of countless children. And they need that help and that love and that care. So, with that in mind, before we begin, I do want to mention a few things. You are muted, but you're welcome to join the conversation with your beautiful face in the video or by using the chat. So talk to one another, share where you're from, share your frustrations, share your successes. And if you have a question, great. When it pops into your head, ask it and we'll address it, and we'll address as many as we can in the Q&A that we're going to have at the end of the webinar. Is there so much information and you keep wanting to see more? Well, guess what? You can, because we're going to be posting this on YouTube. So feel free to watch this as many times as you want. And if there's something you missed, know that you have that opportunity. Tomorrow, we'll be sending out an email with resources and materials that you hear us bring up as well. So you can take all the ideas and implement them in your own virtual classrooms as soon as you like. Finally, feel free to share stories on Instagram. Grab a picture of our conversation or a powerful slide or a meaningful moment and share it and tag us. The four of us are on Instagram, and we'd love to keep the conversation alive outside this webinar with the hashtag #StudentsFirst. So feel free to use that throughout and after the conversation ends. With that, let's jump in though, as I introduce my friend and colleague, Czarina Jimenez. Czarina, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can pass it off to you. Okay. And I do want to share a little bit about Czarina while she gets ready, friends. So we're just going to pass it off to her in a moment. Just going to pull up her bio so I can share a little bit about what Czarina has to offer us today. Okay, friends, sorry about that. Thanks for your patience while I pulled that up. Czarina is an elementary classroom music and choir teacher in Southern California. She is in her 7th year of teaching and works with pre-K through 6th grade students. As an educator, her passions are creating culturally responsive music lessons and incorporating social emotional learning into her curriculum. She has a Bachelor's of Music in Music Education and a Master of Arts in Neuroscience and Education. Mental health is her jam, and she loves talking about healing and growing. She co-hosts a mental health podcast with her elementary girlfriends called Brown Girl Feels. To keep her creative sparks alive, she writes jingles about self-care on Instagram under the hashtag Self-Care Song Series. She posts the chords to these songs on her Patreon, along with lessons and resources. When she's not teaching, she's hanging out with her drummer hubby, Kevin, and their pup, Sadie. You can keep in touch with her on Instagram at Little Upbeat Class. Czarina, take it away.
All right. Hello, hello. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking your time to just spend with us and to talk about how we can just reconnect with our students in ways that are meaningful and powerful. So tonight, I'm going to keep saying today because I'm in the past over here on the West Coast. But I wanted to talk about the culture shift. We talk so much about classroom culture and what that looks like and how to build it, especially at the beginning of a school year. And with this pandemic hitting towards the end of our school year, it's almost, well, it's like the school year started all over again. And so what we need to do is we need to take a moment to talk about this culture shift. So we are in crisis teaching. This is important to recognize because even though, you know, we may have our lesson plan set and we may know who our students are, things are not the same, and that's very obvious. I know Michelle has mentioned this to me before, where she knows about virtual teaching, online teaching. She's a pro, but it still feels like something is off. And that's because we are all collectively feeling and experiencing trauma together at different levels, but that baseline is still the same. Something is wrong. One of the ways that has physically shown up for our students is before there was school and there was home. Now there is school home, and that boundary has really been blurred. I know for me as an adult, as a teacher, someone working from home, it's already really tough for me to figure out, how do I do this, and how do I maintain my own sanity and have that grace under pressure when there isn't that physical separation between school and home. And so I know that if I'm feeling this way, I'm not the only one. So that means we have to ask ourselves, what do we do when our classroom culture shifts to classroom at home culture? We hit a hard reset on our cultural competence. Cultural competence to me is such a huge thing, especially when it comes to music. Music is something that weaves through and encompasses all levels of culture, whether it's your individual idea of yourself and of who you are, whether it's, singing the songs that you sing with family on your road trips, or even something like a country's anthem. Music just kind of goes through every bit of culture. And so when we are teaching music, we need to have that cultural competence set. So what does a hard reset look like for us? We need to look at three things: our teacher self-awareness, understanding our students, and then finding the appropriate strategies to put that all into practice. So first, teacher self-awareness. We need to recheck our bias. Maybe we are the teachers who have been really good at this during the school year, making sure that we aren't coming up with the worst assumptions of our students. Maybe we are very conscious about privilege or very conscious about the way that race shows up in interactions or in ways of power structures. But we need to remember that if that's what we were doing when we were on our school campus, it's still very different now that our students are learning from home. We might have a bias of thinking, oh, that student's probably not going to log into my classes. Or we might have a bias of thinking the complete opposite. Oh, that student must have all the technology, so I'm not going to need to work extra hard to connect with them. We need to make sure that we take those lenses off and that we don't look through a lens of bias. Next, we need to stop deficit-based thinking. It's so easy to say or to describe our students by the things that they don't have. You know, maybe they don't have good internet, or maybe they don't have access to technology, or maybe they don't have parents who have the time availability to sit with them and make sure that they accomplish all the tasks that they need to do for school. Those are situations your students are experiencing. Those things do not describe who they are as a person and as a human being. And we need to make sure we don't fall into that trap of deficit-based thinking, because our students are people. They're not the situations happening to them. One article that has been really great for me to reframe this has been this one by Elizabeth Caldwell. And she says in this article, your missing students aren't behavior problems. And so for me, that's honestly a very freeing thing too. She says to think of them more as a student who just couldn't make it to your class that day. They're not doing it to spite you. They're not doing it whatever because there's something wrong with you. No, they're just experiencing life just like we are, and they're trying to do their best. So what we need to do then is we need to give ourselves grace. When I remember this, then I'm able to give myself a little bit more grace. I'm putting the best of myself as best as I can online for my students. And that's all I need to do. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes for me, I just want to sleep and stay in my pajamas all day, and that's okay. Because I, just like my students, am a human being as well. Next, we need to understand our students. As Maya Angelou said, people will never forget how you made them feel. And so we want to make sure that we put relationships first, always. Make sure that the things that you're putting online for your students to do, give them that space to hold feelings. They're experiencing so much, and as music teachers, we really can create activities or experiences for them where they can kind of bring those feelings out and to light and to hold them up and acknowledge what they are. I know that my colleagues are going to share some amazing activities to do this, but an easy one that I like to do is to have students sometimes send me songs, like a playlist. Send me a song that shows like that you're listening to right now, or what's a song that shares with me how you're feeling right now. And because it's in someone else's words, sometimes that's a bit of a more approachable way to let them, or to let you know how they're feeling. And then finally, don't assume, just ask. If you've built a relationship with your students, you can ask them and not assume anything. But if you're in the process of building a relationship with your students, which of course we always are at different levels in that journey, asking is always better than assuming. They might not want to answer your question, they might not answer it at all, but it's always going to be better for us to ask and assume the best than to not ask and assume the worst. Finally, appropriate strategies. I want to point out this graphic right here. This has been so key and so helpful for me. Alex Shervin-Bennett talks a lot about what trauma-informed distance learning looks like. And so these four, she calls them oh goodness, 4 priorities are so key when we are planning and structuring our lessons for our students. Predictability, maybe making sure that you share everything on the same day so they know when they can tune in and they can find you. Flexibility. Sometimes, you know, your students won't be able to turn in something the same way, or maybe they won't be able to turn it in at all. Give them that flexibility to know that it's okay and to know that there's other ways to do things. Connection, of course, always. One of the best ways to keep ourselves resilient through times of stress and trauma is through our relationships. Relationships are what build resiliency. And so it's so important that we continue providing those moments for our students to connect not only with us as their teacher, but to connect with each other and their peers. And finally, empowerment. Give your students the opportunity to choose an activity they want to do or to share their opinion on something that's going on. We want to give them some sort of ownership because we're going through such tumultuous times where really things, even for us as grown-ups, feel like they are completely out of our control. And so we can provide those moments of empowerment for our students through the things that we share and the things that we teach with them. The other things are open communication with students and with family, and making sure that, you know, their family members and the students know that they can always contact you and reach out for anything. So with these 3 things set in place, what we learn is that bringing humanity to online learning is actually choosing connection over compliance. It's prioritizing the relationship with our students. It's providing space for honesty, for vulnerability, and for real feelings to come out in brave ways. And it's making sure that our students know that they can continue to, you know, do the things that bring them creative joy, and that we will continue supporting them as they do that, even if it's just from home. So let's reimagine. I want you to type into the chat box right now, what were the best parts of your pre-pandemic classroom? Whether that classroom was physical in a building or that classroom was virtual online, what were the best parts of that pre-pandemic classroom for you? I'm gonna see if I can pull up this chat and read a couple. Dancing together, smiling faces, freedom, safe space, creative, supportive, the energy, relationships. Oh, yes. Their stories, being able to sing and move together. The chaos, I kind of do miss that loudness. So the best parts of our pre-pandemic classroom culture, after everything that you've been typing in: joy, belonging, creativity, what else? Everything that you've been saying. This is the magic. This is the amazingness that we bring to our classroom. It's not our amazing organizational skills. I don't know, whatever you think that it usually is. No, this is the magic. This is what our students will take away from this time, that we've stayed connected with them and we've brought them magic. So friends, put that magic online. Thanks so much. And I'm so excited for the rest of my friends who are going to be sharing with us right now. So Matthew Stensrud is going to be sharing next, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And let me tell you a bit about this awesome teacher. So Matthew Stensrud, he is award-winning, internationally acclaimed elementary music and movement teacher. I definitely fangirl over Matthew quite often. He teaches preschool through 4th grade music and movement at the Civil Friends Lower School in Washington, D.C. He has both a master's and bachelor's in music education, and is an Orff Schulwerk approved teacher educator of movement. He presents frequently at schools, district, state conferences, Orphan Kodai chapters, and national conferences, and loves sharing and dancing with fellow music educators. You may know him as Mr. S, as you can find him as Mr. S Orff across all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Patreon. So Matthew, so excited for what you're going to share with us.
Thank you, Czarina. What a lovely way to start off our webinar together. That was so incredibly special and very tone setting, I think, for the conversation we're going to continue having. So feel free to continue to use the chat to share with one another throughout. And it was really special to see what everyone was sharing that meant so much to them about the classrooms. And I miss all of that as well, along with everyone. So I know those feelings very deeply. Even though I often have a shiny exterior personality-wise, I know those feelings as well on the inside. So I appreciate everyone is sharing them with us. I thought we would start with a mindful moment with a loving kindness card that you'll see here. So sit mindfully with your spine straight and body relaxed. Hold your hand over your heart and repeat to yourself, may I be happy. May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I be kind. Now, think of a friend or family member and repeat to yourself, may you be happy. May you be safe. May you be peaceful. May you be kind. Now imagine someone you don't know. May you all be happy. May you all be safe. May you all be peaceful. May you all be kind. Continue your day knowing that everyone wants to be happy, just like you do. So a special mindful moment, and one that I think is very fitting for now. So imagine if you took a moment in your virtual classroom to do that with your students. How powerful do you think that could be for them to share that moment with you, for you to open up to them that sometimes you feel sad and sometimes you feel anxious, and that those feelings are okay. I think that that's what's really special about these mindful kid cards. So I wanted to do one of them today. I use the yoga cards more frequently in my classroom setting, but these cards are coming up more and more often in virtual learning environments, because I think the kids need some time to reflect on their feelings. And you can fit that in with a mindful card into your 10-minute lesson quite easily. And think about how special that would be for the students to have. So I wanted to start it off with us as well together. The responsive classroom main principle is that how we connect with our students, how our students learn, that social curriculum is as essential as the content that we are teaching them. And too often we're pushed to meet, the curriculum guidelines and testing standards that we completely lay the social curriculum by the wayside. But the music classroom is an incredibly valuable space to build the social curriculum of our students. And we cannot lose that. We must not let that disappear in a virtual learning environment. I think it can actually be just as impactful as long as we take the time to explore it. So what does building this virtual curriculum look like? A few things to kind of plant as seeds is simply the connection for the opportunities for students to be with you. Do you welcome them into a live class? Do you spend that moment where you ask how someone's day is going? Do you spend some time at the end and offer students to stay if they have something they might want to share? Do you ask it in a recorded lesson where you ask the question and pause for a few seconds? that connection that you're making with the students in those places may seem forced, but for a lot of students, it will be very real and very meaningful for them. A virtual social curriculum also can empower student voice. You might be asking yourself, how does that happen in a pre-recorded session? How do I offer student voices to occur? Simply by providing the same wait time that you do in a real classroom, you're giving the students chances to respond. Not unlike a Mr. Rogers scenario where you ask the question and the kids are yelling back at the TV. They're creating that, they're not only just creating that connection, they're then having a voice in the process. And they're feeling a part of your music making when you give them that space. And too often we might, in pre-recorded videos, run over those questions and continue the teacher voice as opposed to allowing that space for students to respond. And maybe they're just thinking. That's still an essential student voice that's happening, as opposed to simply always listening to the teacher. What kinds of questions are you asking? Anyone who knows me knows that a what if question is my favorite question. So these kinds of queries help students expand their creativity and imagination. And it lets them make their own choice then on what to do next, as opposed to giving them a closed question that only has one answer. Lastly, think about the small talk that you can offer, whether it's letting students chat at the beginning or at the end of a class or some space in the middle, and how it doesn't always have to be content specific. What if you just want to ask the students about something they did that day? Or if I watched Star Wars for May the 4th be with you, and have that conversation. And of course, it might lead to a lightsaber movement activity, which it did with my students earlier today and earlier this week. But having that small talk, I think it was Zaretta Hammond, and I'm going to mention a quote by her in a moment, but she talks about how the social emotional learning of a student they'll feel much safer in a space when they've been able to have those non-content specific conversations with their teachers. Just these conversations about a day or about something that they want to share. So think about how you can build that into your virtual teaching. Here's the quote I wanted to mention, as the old adage has it: whoever is doing the talking is doing the learning. And research shows just that. So if we're providing places for our students to speak, even in a pre-recorded lesson, then they are learning more. One way we can do that is through open-ended queries. And I gave a little bit of an insight into that with my what if question. But we also know through Responsive Classroom that children naturally go through a cycle that begins with wonder and exploration and moves towards discovery, a really exciting space, and then a reflection on what just happened. And then the whole process loops again. So the questions we ask are really going to guide students in their path toward that discovery. It's not really a discovery for a student if you're laying the answer out on a plate for them. So here are some second questions you can consider. Perhaps after you ask, what do you notice? You could then ask, what if? Or I wonder why? Or what makes you say that? Or would you rather? And too often we skip past those questions, which is easy to do. We think I'm only making a 10-minute video. How can I possibly ask these questions? But putting the space in for them is really valuable. I spent some time in a live class today and I asked those questions, and even though the students were muted on the other end, I could see them speaking loudly at me, enough that I could hear what they were really saying. You could watch it. And how exciting is it to have that engagement? But you have to ask those questions. It's when you start going through the motions and giving a lecture, which even on ta and tati can happen pretty quickly, and then all of a sudden you'll notice the students aren't retaining that knowledge. Next, think about the academic choices you can provide. When students have the freedom to choose their own learning pathways, it gives them a strong sense of self. And that comes with a sense of belonging that's incredibly valuable. So we're going to do a little activity in a moment where you'll see the pathways that students will be able to create. And how exciting is that to make that happen in a virtual teaching environment? It doesn't always have to be identify these rhythms or work on this dictation or these other activities or call in responses. But what if the students could actually create something? It is possible. Here are some ideas to consider when you're thinking about those student choices. Give students possibilities for composition. This allows them to make the choice of including, if they're perhaps making a melody, plenty of notes in the pentatonic scale, or maybe just 2. Do you really need to set that parameter when maybe the students just want to share that recorder piece on A because they feel really good about playing this rhythm on A? And I think sometimes we forget about that and letting the students have those choices. It's not because the student is being lazy, which I think is an easy thing, an easy mindset to have. So let your students make those choices and then ask the second questions as they reflect upon their academic choice. You know, what made you make that? Would you rather this when the students are working through their compositions? Same thing goes for poetry and the kinds of feelings. And I know that Czarina talked about this too, that when we let the students express their feelings, poetry is really valuable for that. And how that could then be put to rhythms, or it could be put to, you know, a sort of like speech rap poetry scenario that could be really valuable for the students. Maybe the students want to make something, and you can make found creations with melodic lines or rhythmic patterns that use things all around the house. And this one is pretty special because the students might have something they really want to show you, and here's a way that they can do it. They really want to make their rhythmic patterns out of Jell-O boxes because they haven't told you that story yet, that they make Jell-O every day with their parents. And it's such a fun thing for them that those boxes is a part of their lives. And I had no idea that was something that a student was thinking until they shared it with me a couple of weeks ago. How interesting was that? And you're creating that SEL connection by letting the student like showcase a part of their life. Or how about movement? I find that movement is one of the most powerful ways to let students express themselves. And again, you might be setting a couple of parameters, but letting the students make the choice on what the movement is or what it looks like. Or perhaps you're letting students choose from all 4 of these, and that's even possible. So for just a moment, we're going to explore a little bit of a responsive classroom with the story Mother Earth. So I'm just going to read a little part of it and think about the opportunities for exploration. Think about the opportunities for wonder, the places for academic choice, the places for open-ended questions that I can provide the students. Here are a few images from the story. Think about which part of the story might connect to an image. Mother Earth. The earth is our mother. What image speaks to you now? Why do you say that? What if you picked a different image for that phrase? Why'd you pick that one? The ground is her skin, mountains, her bones. What image are you thinking of now? trees and plants, her living hair. Where do you see hair in these images? Why did you pick that one? What other words come to mind when you think of that? Birds are her songs, and the listening stones, her ears. Animals, her fingers. Where do you see fingers? Where do you see animals? What if you could imagine an animal in a picture where there aren't any? Which animals did you choose? Would you rather have your new animal in your new picture or one of the pictures you already see? What if you could put them together somehow? Her dreams, the sea and all its swimmers, the water, her blood. Do you sense the word blood in any of the images here? What makes you say that? The air, her breath. Sunlight, the warmth of her body. Did we explore all the pictures or maybe not? Which picture spoke the most to you? If you could only pick 4 pictures, which ones would you choose? Which one do you think you would put first? Why do you choose that one? Well, that's interesting. What if you had to pick a different one, actually? That's really interesting too. It seems like you have some choices to make. So some responsive ideas with Mother Earth. What questions are you asking during the story instead of just reading it? What specifically are those questions? Too often we can ask a question that's not open-ended. Sometimes you might ask, what do you notice in this picture? And someone says, oh, I notice a dolphin. And you say, there aren't any dolphins in this picture. What are you talking about? How does that make the student feel? Instead, what if you said, oh, that's interesting. Why did you say that? Well, there isn't really a dolphin, but I just imagine there's one in the water. What a beautiful insight the student might have that you could have shot down because it was wrong. And what if there aren't wrong answers? What if you could let the students and guide them? And by continuing to ask questions, they're building so much critical thinking. So what choices can you give them for creating? If we look back on our ideas, what if you could choose some images and make a dance? Or, what if you instead wanted to write a poem? Or what if you wanted to make a found sound piece where you find different sounds in your house that make you think of those pictures? And now the students have 3 ways that they want to share their knowledge with you. And you've given them that academic choice. And in the pre-recorded video, I would give a 30-second snippet of what each of those look like, so they can have a teacher example. But then the students are making the choice on how they want to pursue it. And some of them like that template because they'll make something quite similar. Others will make something drastically different. But because they know they've had choices, they have the autonomy that sometimes we forget to include in the classroom. So I know I need to pass this on. So I'm going to pass this on to my friend, Michelle, who I'm excited to welcome today. But I really appreciate the chance to talk with you about some of these ideas. And we have much more wonderful information to learn. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to my friend and colleague, Michelle Rose. Michelle is a full-time virtual music teacher. Isn't that amazing? What value does it bring to have her in the conversation? Because she's been doing this long before us. She teaches middle and high school general music and directs the extracurricular virtual band orchestra and virtual choir at North Carolina Virtual Academy. She is also the director of the International Music Education Summit Virtual Honor Band. Michelle holds a bachelor's degree in music education and performance on the flute and is currently pursuing a master's in music education from the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. She is a teacher, author, and blogger at themusicalrose.com. Michelle has been a presenter at several conferences and has been a guest speaker for pre-service music teachers at colleges across the country. In her free time, she enjoys baking, sewing, and going on walks with her dog, Tavi, short for Beethoven.
Tovi, sorry.
Or is it Tovi?
Yeah.
It's probably Tovi, isn't it? To keep in touch with Michelle, follow her on Instagram at The Musical Rose. And now she can tell us her dog's actual name. So let's welcome Michelle.
Awesome. Thank you all. I'm super excited to be here today. Yes. So my husband and I are both music people. And so we wanted to name our dog something musical. So we went with Tovi, short for Beethoven. But it is a difficult name to look at and kind of try to read. But anyway, today I am going to talk a little bit about creating virtual connections. And so I have been a virtual teacher for a couple of years now, so I totally understand the position you're all in, especially, you know, I was definitely overwhelmed and drowning that first semester. And so my goal is to help you all feel a little more comfortable with creating these virtual connections. And if you want more guidance, please reach out to me. I am trying to help as many people during this time as I can. So I'm excited to be here and to be collaborating today. So first off, I just want to say that you can build positive connections virtually. So a lot of times I hear like, well, virtual learning is just not personal, or it just isn't the same thing, or it can't be the same thing as in-person relationships, or there's no way to do this, it's cold, it's robotic, it's technology. But I challenge you to push back against this. I do not know these 3 other people who I am presenting with from real life, from in person. I've met them all through the magic of the internet. And I've known Czarina for the longest. I've been following her. We like fangirl over each other all the time. And I told her, as soon as this is all over, I'm gonna book a ticket to California. Like as soon as I can travel safely, I'm gonna go out there. And that is because I built a positive connection virtually. So we do this all the time in our internet communities, and I just wanted to kind of shift the mindset a little bit. It's possible, it's just different. Everything is possible in online education, but a lot of times it's just different. And so with that said, I also just want to reiterate, oh, and I forgot to turn on closed captions. There we go. I also just want to reiterate that connecting and caring for students virtually does not, first of all, require students to talk on the mic. So if you are having students who are, you know, maybe a little bit shy to talk on the mic or aren't getting on the mic talking, that's okay. You can still show that you care. If students don't want to turn on their camera, That's okay. You can still connect with them and show that you care. You don't have to put extensive amounts of your own time and energy. You don't have to drive to your students' houses and wave to all, I know I have over 300 students all across the state of North Carolina, but you don't have to go to every student's house and wave to them kind of through the window or something like that. There are lots of those videos that are amazing and really cool connections, but you don't have to put extensive amounts of time and energy to be able to connect and care for your students. You don't have to have super long lessons or discussions. So I'm going to show you several ways that I do this on a consistent basis. And I was doing this before COVID-19, but I definitely increased the amount of check-ins and stuff that I was doing with my students. So I'm going to show you a couple quick ways that I check in with students virtually. And I do teach middle and high school students, but I have a few things for elementary folks as well. So first, I want to talk a little bit about using Nearpod. And so Nearpod is one of my absolute favorite resources to teach virtually. And so I'm going to show you a couple activities that I do with my students. And so I'm going to put the link in the chat. If you'd like to join in, please just know if you put your name in, it might come up on the recording. So if you want to put a fake name in, that's fine too. But just know that if you do join in, that there is a possibility that your name may show up on the screen. So again, go ahead and join me in using Nearpod. The link is in the chat. I'll put it in again. And you can go ahead and answer that first question while we're waiting for a couple people to join. And so I always try to have something for students to do. And so using this first check-in question or something like that is a great way to give students an activity to do while, some students may be signing in a little bit late or having some tech issues or any of that. We're not just like kind of sitting. So I am going to share my screen now and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So like I said, this is a participatory activity, so you can participate if you would like, but if you don't want to, that's fine too. All right, so let's see. And so usually the first time I do this, here we go, I will tell my students, if you want to add a picture or a GIF, down here you'll click on this blue button because it's not like it says, this is a picture, how to add a picture. So, and then you can search here. And so you can search for some. All right, and then so things will pop up and save and post. There we go. And so it's a great way to kind of check in. And then on my side, so this is what the students will see. This is what you should see. On the teacher side, you can see who has posted what. And so this is a great way to kind of look at, who may, be having some trouble or who may be feeling anxious. I see you, Caitlin, and I recognize that. The grumpy cat. So yes, so this is a great way to kind of check in the beginning of a lesson. All right, so now for my elementary folks. So this is, I always try to use timers when we have more time and it's not just adults. I usually do more than 30 seconds. But this helps to give appropriate wait time. So I love that Nearpod will automatically add in, or you can set it to there to be a timer automatically. And this will give wait time because wait time feels so awkward on virtual teaching. So having timers are my best friend. I always use timers to help with wait time. So I'm going to go ahead and press start the activity and it'll count down on your end. And then for the elementary kiddos, you can tell them click on this and it will blow up the picture and you can kind of see, if students can't maybe fully read all of those words yet, especially with your younger kiddos, they can at least, identify the number and see the picture. And so I tell them you can select an answer. You can also change it to select more than one answer. So if you want to say, okay, if you're feeling more than one thing at a time, that's totally fine. Just go ahead and select all that you're feeling. And so After time is up, you can also share out these answers. And so you can kind of say, all right, well, it looks like we're feeling a whole lot of different things today. You're not alone if you're feeling scared, or you're not alone if you're feeling just okay. And so just kind of giving space for students to feel what they're feeling. And also, it doesn't take that long. Again, usually I give, at least a minute and 30 seconds for students to kind of think and respond, but it's, I will give you a copy of this at the end. So if you want this exact one that's made like this, I will have that for you. All right, another thing, so I think it's easy to kind of get caught up on just checking in. And yes, I am also glad no one is quite angry in the webinar. So I think it's important to also acknowledge that there are good things that are still happening, and to kind of bring a little bit of joy and lightness, especially when, the rest of your day can be a little bit heavy. And so tell me, what is one good thing that happened this week? And so with this, this does not have a timer option. So if there are things that don't have the timer, I usually have a timer. Either I'll say, okay, on my phone, I'm going to put up 30 seconds, I'll hold it up, or, I will use a different window. So I see lots of awesome things coming in, and you can say, all right, if you really liked hearing about someone else's answer, you can give it a heart or a like. I loved that someone got their hair done today. Oh, that's awesome. I love that someone received a positive parent email. Give that a heart. So I love that there are also so many things happening in your lives right now that are good. So great. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and move on to this next one. But again, on your end, you'll be able to see exactly who's saying what. And I also make some notes, just to check in with students. Another secret feature that I really like about Nearpod is that you can see who is on the screen and who is not. So I know some of you are on Nearpod, but anyone who's read it is, that means that they have clicked away in some way. So that's also a great way to be, not necessarily to call students out, but just to kind of check in and say, hey, are you having any, usually I phrase it as, hey, if you're having trouble, or if you got kicked out and you need to refresh the page, here's the link again. So always assuming the best intent. I always assume there's a tech issue and not that a student is not paying attention. And I always say, if you're having tech issues, please let me know in the chat, or here's the link if you got kicked out, because that does happen as well. Okay, the next thing I really love about Nearpod, and so I will put in, I will put in a breathing exercise, and so we won't go through it, but it automatically opens when you do a live lesson in Nearpod. And so the nice thing is then, so this is just one, I have included this breathing exercise in the resources I'm going to give you, but the nice thing is once it's done and you move on, it also closes out the student, so students can't get lost wandering through the internet. Because it is, really fascinating. Oh, I just want to keep looking at this when you kind of want to move on. So it's a great way to kind of provide that little bit of breathing room, in the middle of a lesson, or to start out. And then lastly, this is one of my favorite ones to do with students, just because it's great to, see what students love. And so I say, okay, pick a picture of or a GIF of your favorite animal and give a heart out to, some anyone that you agree with. And so these are great ways to kind of, share. Oh, look at this cute little otter. See, that just like brought so much joy to me just in a moment. And so these are just a few ways, a few activities that you can use with students to kind of make, your live lessons a little bit lighter, use the check-in and stuff like that. All right, so I am going to go back and, where did it go? Oh, sorry. Okay, here we go. So I'm gonna transition back to real quick. And so that was kind of like my longest demonstration, but I love to use Nearpod. I think that there are so many opportunities to go beyond music. And if you are interested, I did do a quick training too on how I use it for the elementary classroom. So that is on my website. Okay, tip number 2, make the most of your extra time. And so that includes bell ringers, exit tickets, and transitions. So when people come into my class, I always have a slide up that asks them to do something or asks them to watch a video or something like that. But I think it's really a great idea to try to use this extra time to check in with students and that kind of thing. So bell ringers, you can use this time. I like to send students private chats, and so I'll say, hey, so-and-so, so great you joined me today. How is your week going? How are you doing? I remember last week you told me that you were going to get a new dog. How did you end up adopting a dog? That kind of thing. So use that time in the beginning of class, not necessarily to talk out loud, because sometimes it's awkward. You're talking to just one student and then all the other students are watching. So use that private chat feature and connect with students that way. You can have students come in and just say, send me an emoji in the chat of how you're feeling today. I also like to, do those breathing exercise videos, visualization breathing, just as a warm up. And I'll say, okay, here's the link to that. Go ahead and do that. And we'll come back together. Gonna start in 3 minutes. I also like to sometimes just share calming music. So if you're in Zoom, under share, you can share your computer noise or computer sound, and that's how you do it. Exit tickets, I do all of my exit tickets through Google Forms. And so in addition to including content questions, I include check-in questions. So maybe I'll put 2 content questions and then ask, how are you doing today? Or what is something good that happened this week? Or how can I help you right now? And so I have an example and that I'll show you, in a moment. But let me just go through transition time. So, and then lastly, transition time. There was a little bit of transition time in between, me sharing my screen on Nearpod and everyone getting logged in. So use that time to say, as you're logging in, feel free or share how you're feeling today in the chat. Or, if I'm having students log into Smart Music, if you're ready to move on, if you've logged into Smart Music, give me an emoji on how you are feeling today. And so using those little moments as check-in, as an opportunity for students to share how they're feeling and that kind of thing. And so I have a quick, exit ticket so that I will share with you all. And so you will get a copy of this, but I just wanted to show you real quick, just pretty simple Google form of, here we go, sharing back and forth. So these are all just different questions I've asked on my exit ticket. I don't usually ask all of these. I'll pick like 1 or 2, but asking about today, the whole week, asking them to share what's good in their life, not just focusing on like the potential chaos or overwhelm of it all. This one is really big for me. What can I do to support you, or what do you need help with? Because you'll be surprised what students, it might be as simple as, I don't know how to access this one thing, but they're kind of, they don't want to email you. There's a lot of embarrassment that goes on, especially in middle and high school, where a lot of people assume like, oh, they're older, so they should be able to figure it out. But the technology literacy should never be assumed. And so this gives students space to kind of, you're offering, okay, how can I help you? This one is my favorite one. I always steal. What is something another teacher is doing that you find helpful? So this is how I steal good ideas from other teachers. And what can I do to help you learn better? Especially important right now. Students will tell you a lot about how they can be better supported. And then, is there anything else you'd like me to know? You usually only get like a couple kids that end up answering that one, but it can be really important to hear that. And so last little bit, I know I'm running short on time. So last little thing is talking about self-care Fridays. And so self-care Fridays are some of my favorite parts of teaching And so on Self-Care Fridays, so I do Self-Care Fridays in my non-music class called Reaching Your Academic Potential, but I've also been doing more self-care lessons in my music classes as well. And so I really love this definition of self-care. I always start out with it. The term self-care refers to activities and practices that we can engage in on a regular basis to reduce stress and maintain and enhance our short and longer term health and well-being. Self-care is also necessary for you to be effective and successful in honoring your professional and personal commitments. So I always read this to students as we are starting out the lesson, because I think it's important for students to understand what self-care is, because self-care has kind of become a buzzword. So this kind of gives them a reference point of what self-care is, why it's important. And so, here are some Self-Care Friday ideas, and I will have a PowerPoint for you that includes some of my lesson. I don't have time to teach the whole lesson right now, but I wanted to give you some starting points. It is intended for high schoolers, but I think you can definitely adapt it to other grade levels for sure. And so these are all Self-Care Friday activities or practices. I always also back up my ideas with research, so that way students understand that I'm not just kind of pulling these ideas from nowhere. It's really important for me to share where I am getting my information from. So I'll always cite a source or two saying there is research behind why you should take care of yourself and why these things are important. And so I won't read this whole list out to you because I know you are adults and can read, but we just did this practice today, creating a gratitude practice. And so students wrote teacher appreciation thank you emails. And so I also shared the science behind, like, you know, gratitude practices are when you write thank you notes or emails, it not only is a boost for the person receiving it, but also you as the person writing it. And so I suggested finding a time, you know, once a month or, you know, once at the end of the semester or whatever, to create a regular gratitude practice where you write to other people. And so this, again, not maybe necessarily specifically music related, but, you know, having one day a week or, you know, one lesson every so often where it just focuses on the care of students, I think really speaks volumes to students that you care about them as a whole human, and also kind of reminds you that you need to be practicing self-care as well. So now the illustrious resources. So if you go to bit.ly/students first resources, you can download the links to everything that I talked about. I have provided copies of everything that I went over to date. And so if you want to connect with me, my main jam is Instagram. I'm at @themusicalrose, or my website is themusicalrose.com. And thank you all. I know that there is questions coming, so I will address those later. But now I want to go ahead and introduce the fabulous other Matthew. And so I'm going to read his bio as he begins sharing. So Matthew Pedregón is currently in his 15th year as an elementary music teacher and holds a master's degree in music education with an emphasis in orchestral work, and has taught in several schools in New Mexico and Colorado. He has had experience working with populations representing a broad set of demographics, from schools of poverty to schools of affluence to schools with a minority majority population, as well as schools with a white majority population. He recently completed a study on trauma-informed teaching practices in the elementary music classroom, which was published in the summer of 2019 issue of Orff Echo. Woo! That's awesome. All right. In addition, Matthew is considered a teacher activist, having been a founding member of the immigrant advocacy group Teachers United for Immigrants' Rights. He is highly active in the teachers union in Colorado at both the district and the state levels. He has advocated for his district for LGBTQ+ inclusive practices, has worked closely with his district's Office of Inclusive Excellence in working toward racial equity, has lobbied the state and local officials for pro-public education policies, and has even emceed a rally in the state capitol in Denver. Currently, Matthew teaches K-5 general music in South suburban Denver and is happy to bring his passion and expertise to this webinar. Please give it up for the wonderful Matthew.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was quite the bio reading. I didn't realize I was getting the superhero announcing voice. That was lovely. Thank you.
I couldn't
Okay,
wait.
so when I was contemplating the theme of this webinar, keeping students first and bringing humanity to teaching, and after considering, you know, my research and experience and things I've read, two major things came to the surface, things that I felt were our top two essentials that I kind of distilled things down to, and those were relationships and social emotional learning. And I was just delighted to hear my colleagues' presentations, because I'm like literally just going to reinforce exactly everything that we kind of just heard. And so, you know, as I heard these things go through the webinar just now, I was like, yes, that's exactly right. So with relationships, I consider this my number one tool when studying how to approach, you know, how to teach students with trauma, as well as a culturally responsive teaching. Relationships always kind of rises to the top. Okay, it's kind of like the number one tool, and I was just delighted to hear all the different examples of how to maintain those relationships through distant learning. And one thing that I was considering when we made this transfer was the second bullet here. I kind of like made up this combination of words that just nonverbal affective communication. And that is this idea that so much of how we communicate as human beings has nothing to do with the words that are coming out of our mouth. Okay, our brains, when we're in proximity with one another, are transmitting a bajillion chunks of information back and forth with our facial expressions, how we're standing, our what we're doing with our hands, okay, our inflection of our voice. That communicates almost at this subconscious level and more on an affective level than a cognitive level. And so our students get a feel for how we feel about them through this kind of nonverbal affective communication avenue. And I kind of learned this the hard way. I used to teach a while ago at an arts camp in Southern California and Idlewild, and the classroom is, you're just literally out there in the woods, and people would wear their sunglasses. And I'm like, why won't my students are responding as I'm accustomed to them responding? And it was just something really simple, like not wearing sunglasses so they can see my eyes, and the engagement level noticeably kind of clicked up. Okay, so how do we do this? But we're distant learning. When speaking with colleagues, I'm noticing different levels of how we're implementing and delivering instruction online. And I have several colleagues, you know, music or not music, that are writing out, you know, instructions in Google Docs, or doing Google Slides with a voiceover, and things of this nature. And I ask that we kind of reflect on our own personal experiences as adults. What does our communication feel like when we're speaking face-to-face versus, you know, through a FaceTime, where we only get a cropped, framed version of ourselves, versus a telephone call, where it's all audio, no visual, or versus text or email, and the feeling that those levels of communication have. And so I invite that everybody, and I challenge everybody to do videos of themselves, even if it has nothing to do with instruction, even if it's you literally talking to your kids and letting them know that you care and miss them. And just seeing your face, hearing your voice is going to do wonders to really reestablish that connection. Okay, those, you know, affective neurons of like, yes, Mr. Pedregón, yeah, I remember, and I remember the joy that we would have in class. And so I just have been a real big advocate of just video, you know, at least make sure that they can see and hear you. Okay, social emotional learning. Let CASTLE be your guide. And CASTLE is an acronym for the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning. They are like the think tank when it comes to social emotional learning, and have written this lovely set of competencies. And they read and look just like any other competencies for any other content area. I have this printed up and sitting in my lesson plan folder for quick reference, okay? And if you just kind of scan through, you're gonna notice, as music teachers, we do this. Whether we're conscious of it or not, we are hitting a lot, if not all of this stuff, just in our normal everyday teaching. And so by having it along with your lesson plans, you can actually become more conscious of when these moments occur and put a spotlight on those moments to kind of foster that social emotional growth, okay? And so personally in my own teaching, when I do this in my classroom, I really hit this in group work settings when we're cooperative learning and learning how to respect, especially the ones in green, the social awareness and relationship skills. Those ones are kind of, when we're doing cooperative group work, I feel like that's kind of like our like practice session for students to kind of practice and work those skills. But now that that is kind of pulled away from us in this distant learning situation, I have started to turn to stories and storybooks and really highlighting some of these things in the stories that I share with students. I try and make sure that they're connected with the curriculum, but honestly, in this sort of situation, just reading a book for the sake of reading a book to your children to make those emotional connections, okay, at this moment in time, I think is just as valid. So if you get to music, great, that's great too. So let's take a look. I have a book to share with you, and I'm checking the time, and I might have to kind of breeze through or kind of skip through till the end, but I just want to kind of at least share it with you. That is going to be highlighting these three things on our social emotional competencies. So, oh, hold on. Let me see if I can get this. Okay, so I'm going to do this old school style. So if you wanted to make me big on your screen so you can see this lovely read aloud, it is Nico Draws a Feeling. And I came across this book in my level 3 and my level 3 ORF course. And so it personally brings me back to that magical special moment in your level 3 of ORF levels courses for those of you who have had that experience. And I feel very, very fortunate and lucky to have had a beautiful ORF levels experience. And so it takes me back to that place. So if I cry, I'm sorry, because I kind of cry every time I read this. All right, let's take a look. Nico Draws a Feeling. It's kind of dark. When I tested it, the sun was higher in the sky, so I apologize if it's a little dark. Nico loved to make pictures. Everywhere he went, he carried a box of colored pencils and paper, and a pad of paper. Because everywhere he looked, he saw something that inspired him. It might be a mother bird building her nest, or the ice cream truck ring-a-linging down the street, or the low autumn sun peeking out from behind a cloud. When Nico was inspired, it felt like a window opening in his brain. An idea would flit through the open window like a butterfly, flutter down to his stomach, then along his arms and fingers to his pencils, where it would escape onto his paper in a whirlwind of color. It was a wonderful feeling, and Nico tried to capture it as often as he could. Sometimes he showed his pictures to his friends. "What is it?" one of them would ask. "It's the ring-a-ling of the ice cream truck," Nico would answer. "Doesn't look like the ice cream truck," someone else would say. "It's not the ice cream truck," Nico would explain. "It's the ring-a-ling." "Well, where's the bell?" It's not the bell, it's the ring-a-ling. I don't get it. Sometimes he showed his pictures to his parents. What is it? His mom would ask. It's the warmth of the sun on my face, Nico would answer. I don't see the sun, his dad would say. It's not the sun, it's the warmth. Well, where's your face? It's not my face, it's the warmth. Oh. Once he showed a picture to his teacher, Miss Reed. What is it? She asked. It's a hard work of a mother robin building her nest, Nico answered. Where's the robin? It's not the robin, it's her hard work. So this is the nest. It's not the nest, it's the hard work. I see. But Miss Reed didn't see. None of them did. One night, Nico sat on his bed thinking about all the pictures taped to his walls. Then he looked at himself in the mirror. He was inspired to write another picture, only this one he taped to the back of his door where no one else could see it. The next day, Nico was heading out with his paper and colored pencils when he noticed a moving truck next door and a girl about his age. Hi, said the girl. I'm Iris. I'm Nico. Hi. What are you doing with that stuff? Oh, this, nothing. Are you going to draw? Well, yeah, I like to make pictures. Can I see them? I don't know, he said. You might not like them. But I might, Iris answered. Nico decided it would be rude to say no, so he invited Iris over. When they got to his room, Nico waited for her questions, but she just looked and looked. Finally, after looking at every picture in the room, Iris discovered the one behind the door. Wow, said Iris. What? Said Nico. You must have been sad when you made this picture. How did you know? Iris thought, it looks like how I feel, you know, sad because I had to move. Suddenly, Nico felt a window opening in his brain. Can I make a picture for you? Asked Nico. For me? Sure, said Iris. Like a butterfly, an idea flitted through the open window, fluttered down to his stomach, then along his arms and fingers to his colored pencils, where it escaped onto his paper in a whirlwind of color. When he was finished, he handed the picture to Iris. This time, Nico asked the question, what is it? Iris looked at the picture for a long time without saying a word. At last, she looked up at Nico. I'm not sure exactly, but it makes me feel like I made a new friend. Nico stared at Iris. You can see that? I can feel it, Iris replied. Like a butterfly landing on my finger. A butterfly? Asked Nico. I know, it sounds weird. No, Nico smiled. Not to me. So, I've done several different things with this book, and I know you as inspired music teachers are probably have brains a flurry of different things to do with this book, but I feel it to be one of the strongest ways that we can incorporate social emotional learning and recognition of emotions, and how we can express those emotions and maybe be misunderstood, or maybe be look to see and try and understand other people's feelings as well, through the arts and through drawing. So I hope you enjoyed Nico Draws a Feeling. So I know we're kind of short on time, but I believe it is question time. Matthew?
Wonderful. Thank you, Matthew. How special was that? I think everyone has all the feels right now. So we took quite a journey with our webinar today, didn't we? Really quite nice. I also think what it shows immediately is the value of reading a story from beginning to end with, and then perhaps kind of going back and talking through it and asking those questions, as opposed to taking a book and pausing throughout it to have those discussions. And you can really see them both in different ways and how powerful each of them are. So yes, amazing, amazing, amazing. So thank you, Matthew, as well as thank you to Czarina and Michelle. We had lots of valuable insight, I think, and there was a lot of questions that came up too. So we'd love to spend a little bit of time going through some of those queries. And I'll pass it off to some of my friends to help answer some of those questions. So I've been keeping track of a few of them. And one question was a little bit of some clarifying things about Nearpod. So I'm going to pass it over to Michelle in a second. One of the questions that Carissa asked was, how long did it take for students to get in the groove with Nearpod? So maybe if you could talk a little bit about that, as well as anything else that you think might be helpful for teachers regarding Nearpod.
Sure. So I use Nearpod in my live classes, and it's pretty easy, honestly. So I just tell students, okay, I'm going to give you a link. When you click on the link, it's going to ask you to put in your name. Please put in your first name and last initial, or first initial and last name, just so I can keep it FERPA in case I share, I usually try to have it up so students can see exactly what is going to happen. So I will literally app share my screen and say, this is what you should be seeing. If you're not seeing this, please, let me know in the chat. And then I have students log in, and I can see like who's logging in. And so usually I just kind of check that. And that's why I always have an activity going while students are logging in. So they're not just like staring at a slide. They're like, typing how they feel or finding a GIF of their favorite dog, and then also reading people's replies. So I would say that pretty much, I teach middle and high schoolers, but they picked it up really fast. I think it's very intuitive. I will say it's easier to share out that link than to try to share out the, it'll give you a code. So share out the link. That is the easiest way to get there. I hope that answers your question. I will say too, there is an asynchronous version too, so you can do the student-paced one. And again, you just have to tell students they have to click through the slides themselves. But yeah, I think it's very intuitive in terms of like technology, because it doesn't require students to create a login. They can just click on the link. Yeah. Thanks,
Michelle. And if people have questions that maybe they forgot to mention, or they want to ask them again because it's not getting brought up, feel free to in the chat, and I'll kind of monitor that. One of the questions was about Mother Earth. So here's the story, Mother Earth, by Nancy Luen. Really lovely, some beautiful images in it. And there was it's longer than what I just shared. There's a special part at the end that asks, she gives all she is, we take what we can, but what can we give to our mother? Which I think is really powerful discussion too, in April for Earth Day or something like that. So there's so many possibilities. There were some other questions about storybooks as well. There's about adding music. Many times through a suggestion I would have is simply spending some time looking for a piece of music that you think could be really powerful. Perhaps it doesn't have any words, and you can play that in the background. This is really a powerful book to do that with. And what I think can be interesting is, what if I read the story with a different piece of music in the background? What changes does that lead to in how the students feel? Or if you're asking for movement words, what kind of movement words come to mind? Then the music's going to make a big difference. So when you're picking music, that's something to consider. Someone's sharing that Mother Earth is $47. You can see it's just a little paper book, so it may be out of print, and if that's the case, I'm incredibly sorry, but maybe just keep an eye out for it. That could be helpful. I think another question that came up was talking about students who may have challenges with access. I know that we're each in different scenarios when it comes to that, but perhaps Matthew or Czarina, or both of you, if you want to talk a little bit about how we could reach students no matter how they might be able to reach us with access. I think that would be helpful.
Yes. So I'll start, and then Matthew, if you want to like complete my thought for me. So for me, the way that I've been kind of approaching this is more of just trying to provide my students with the opportunity to have that time of engaging with music and creativity. So for I think for the first maybe 3-4 weeks, I purely just focused on creating and sharing pre-recorded lessons for them, as opposed to like doing things live, because in the hopes that a pre-recorded lesson that was like maybe 10-15 minutes long would be a lot easier both to digest and then also to get access to, because I don't know the exact specifics of how your students are having or being able to access technology in their own homes, but just like with the hope that my pre-recorded lessons, yes, they are on YouTube. And what I do is I'll pre-record the lessons, and then I put it on an unlisted playlist. So everything's within one playlist. And then I started out with that. I would send out one email that had all of the lessons hyperlinked into a PDF document so that it was easy for parents. And I noticed that I got the most engagement that way on those lessons. And then keeping it short for the students. And then after that, yes, exactly. Yeah, a lot of my students do share computers with their siblings, and that's a big thing. And then I did not implement any other forms of like online like learning platforms until last week. And then the way that I'm doing that, so I chose, at least for now, totally in love with Nearpod, but for now, for this bit of time, I chose to go with Flipgrid for my younger students. And so that way they can just send in recordings of them. Either I'll like begin an activity in YouTube, like, all right, here is a rhythm, and show me what found instruments you like will match this rhythm scavenger hunt. And so I've had students take a video of themselves with like a chapstick, remote, like things from their house. And for me, I just went with like, what is the most simplistic way of both providing like my lesson to my students, and then providing an opportunity for them to give me feedback, and doing it like not all at the same time. Oh, it did? Oh, Michelle, I'm so excited about that. Okay, but that's all. That's what I did.
Thank you, Czarina. And then Matthew, if you want to share, and also if you have ideas for sharing the question regarding like stories with music and whatnot, that would be helpful too.
Sure. So being billed as activist teacher, I'm like, well, just get all the kids internet. And so I know that sounds like ridiculous, but really, if you are in a situation that has a strong teachers union or any kind of that sort of avenue, any kind of like a building rep or something to address that. And that's how in my district, we've been able to pressure the district to make changes to make things more equitable in an equitable way, whether it be internet, whether it be social emotional learning, whether it be, on culturally responsive stuff, or, all of these kinds of things to really press the district to make that happen. I don't know, because I know that people's situations in that realm kind of can be all over the place. But I agree, just to piggyback on what Czarina talks about, we went with asynchronous learning as opposed to synchronous learning. Okay, the difference being, synchronous learning is like, all right, at 3 o'clock, Miss So-and-so's class is gonna log on, I'm teaching a live lesson. And asynchronous is everything's gonna be recorded and packaged and thrown up on some sort of platform, and they access it on their own, at their own leisure. And that is to accommodate students that have lots of students and limited technology. As far as books, I'm a little crazy. I have a problem with children's books, and they're all at my house. When we had like our 1 hour or whatever in our classrooms, I was like, all the books, here we go. So I know this one's been making the rounds, Every Little Thing, Bob Marley, around Facebook, and these are in no particular, I just scrounged them up around. I have not read this, but it is about a pianist who, Teresa Carreño, played the piano for President Lincoln. I think she's from, I haven't read it yet. I'm gonna guess Venezuela, I'm not 100% sure. Little bio book on Tito Puente. A little book on Carnival of Animals. Conejito has Tia Monica, and it's a Panamanian folktale. The music is in the back, and you can kind of blow that up however you want. A bio book on Trombone Shorty. Harlem's Little Blackbird, a bio book on Florence Mills. Anything with Christian Robinson, ooh, you want to get your hands on it. Awesome, awesome. Matthew can't get that book, is what's going on? This is just one I had lying around, haven't looked at. It's like a songbook of good Woody Guthrie. I know I'm going really fast because our time is kind of done, and all of this will be in notes that we're going to get to somehow. Just bought this. It is literally about Happy, Pharrell Williams Happy, actually. The Noisy Paint Box. I don't know why I grabbed this. Oh, this is about Kandinsky and his synesthesia, his idea that, crossover of the senses of seeing sound and hearing color. There is a tile in Google Chrome Music Lab that basically does this, and it's the Kandinsky tile. And so I'm actually going to do that next week and read this book to them. Another Bob Marley book, One Love. Also, I think I saw Matthew with a, hey, there we go. This one, the lyrics don't transfer as well to the melody. And I'm like, to a cappella, this one is going to be quite the challenge because there's a whole set of backup singers. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but maybe I will, maybe I won't. We'll see. Yeah, so that's my rundown of books that I just had in arm's reach that have music integration stuff. So.
Amazing, 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 Matthew. Thank you. I'm going to pass it back to Michelle as well, really briefly, because I know we're getting low on time, but I also know that people are asking, what's the best way to make these virtual ensembles work? And since she's been virtually teaching for a while, I think that could be really helpful to hear a little bit of insight on.
Okay,
Michelle?
I will make this super brief because I have done a bunch of training, so I do teach virtual ensembles, and so that is definitely the question I get the most. So if you go to, I have created a blog post where I have collected all of the articles, podcast episodes, and I've also done a few mock rehearsals. There's also, on that post, there's also a mock elementary general music classroom lesson where I use Nearpod, and we also play a singing game over Zoom. So it is possible to do singing games over Zoom, I promise. But if you are looking for band and choir resources, again, check out the mock rehearsals that I do. That can give you some information. Also follow me on Instagram. I pretty regularly post about what I'm doing. If you check out my virtual teaching highlight in my bio, that also kind of walks through how to do that. But yeah, that's kind of the short version. The longer version would probably take a couple hours. So look at that post, and then if you have questions, my response time is a little bit delayed because everything's banana pants at my school right now, but let me know. Yeah, so I will get back to you, but it might take me, a couple days. But that's the short version of how I can tell you how to do it all. So check the post out.
Thank you, Michelle. That was really helpful. And there are other webinars out there, and this is the beginning of kind of this conversation. There's lots of other opportunities. There's other webinars that I've been a part of, Staying Connected, that talks a little bit about Seesaw and some other ones, as well as dancing from a distance if you're just interested in dancing and spending some time working with friends. Before we go, I pulled 3 more books because Matthew got me so excited. Butterfly, a beautiful story where the butterfly opens up at the end. So it looks like this. So, I mean, who doesn't love to see this in a story? Another book I talked a little bit about, Wave, and you can find full lesson plans for Wave on my Patreon page. It's a book that has no words. So imagine what kinds of feelings and movements can come from just these pictures. So the students then create their own movements and create pieces, and it's really beautiful. Another one that's great for movement exploration is Not a Stick. If you don't have this one, or Not a Box, you absolutely should explore it. Can you imagine listening to really fun music with your students and then asking them to act out how they slay a dragon with a rhythm stick? Or a spoon, which it's really been fun to watch the students on Zoom with their spoons, or you know, scarves or other sorts of things they found. Another book, Ella, the Queen of Jazz, a beautiful resource and amazing. Matthew talked about the Little Blackbird book, which is phenomenal. And I've used that with Langston Hughes poetry in combination for the students to create some melodies and improvise. That's also beautiful. And this poetry book, Firefly July, short little poems that I'll give the students to then use to create with as well with academic choice. So just a few more extra resources. We could talk about this all day, right? But finally, each of us loves to stay in touch again. So please reach out to all of us on Instagram, follow us. We have websites, we have additional resources that we're happy to offer. Michelle's made some other amazing resources she's talked about. Czarina and I both have Patreon pages and websites, and all four of us love to work with teachers on Instagram and beyond. So before we leave, the final thing is simply a thank you. Thank you for taking a moment from what are really challenging days to reflect on your teaching and how you can make your students' lives better. Because that says a lot about who you are, and it says a lot about how much you care. So even on those tough days, you know, the students are grateful and the students are thankful for what you're doing to make their lives better. So continue being those bright lights for your students. And thanks again for spending your evening with us. So we look forward to staying in touch, and we'll see you again soon.